Hey everyone, welcome to today's Explainer. We're jumping right into something I know we've all dealt with. We are taking a fascinating dive into the mind of the perpetually tardy. You know exactly what I mean. We all know someone who seems to run on their own personal time zone. Or, hey, maybe that person is you. No judgment here. Today we're unpacking the psychology of people who are always, reliably, exactly 5 minutes late. We're going to move past the eye rolls and the sheer frustration and look at what the actual psychological research tells us about this behavior. So let's dive in and see what's really going on behind the clock.
All right, let's kick things off with Section 1, the 5-minute phenomenon, which is really just an eternal struggle, isn't it?
So let me ask you this. Are you the person who is consistently 5 minutes late no matter how early you start getting ready? Seriously, take a second and think about that. If it's you, you absolutely know the feeling. It's this baffling reality where you start an hour early, you have the absolute best intentions, and then, bam, you are still literally sprinting out the door at the very last possible second. And well, if it's not you, I bet that question instantly brought a very specific friend or maybe a coworker right to the front of your mind. Remember, we are talking about a consistent, built-in pattern here, not a random flat tire or a one-off traffic jam.
Moving right along to Section 2. Reframing the tardiness myth, rudeness versus reality.
Society generally looks at lateness pretty black and white. We tend to frame it simply as rudeness, right? Like it's a total lack of respect for other people's time. We're practically wired to view the clock as the ultimate judge of our reliability and how much we care. But actually, the psychological reality is completely different. The research points to totally different mechanisms running the show. Specifically, it's about how these individuals experience time perception and a subconscious rejection of imposed structure. Stripping away all that emotional baggage we normally attach to the clock is absolutely crucial here. Why? Because it reveals that what looks like a glaring character flaw on the surface is actually a super complex cognitive process humming away on the inside.
Which brings us to Section 3, the psychology of lateness. Taking a look inside the mind.
Okay, so it really all starts with time perception. And by that, I mean the subjective way an individual experiences and measures the passage of time. The key takeaway here is that being late is so often rooted in a fundamentally different internal clock. It's not that they don't care. For the chronically late person, 5 minutes might genuinely actually feel like 15 minutes of perfectly good, usable time, especially when they're trying to squeeze in just one last tiny task before leaving. They aren't consciously ignoring the clock. They're literally experiencing time differently. Their brain flawlessly maps out the morning routine, but then drastically underestimates the actual physical minutes required to get those last few steps done.
And that brings us right to the second huge psychological factor, imposed structure. This essentially refers to external, rigid rules and schedules that dictate our behavior. To truly get the chronically late, you kind of have to understand what they're quietly fighting against. We just talked about society's view versus the psychological one, right? Well, a huge piece of that psychological puzzle is a subconscious rejection of this exact imposed structure. It's this internal, almost invisible pushback against a world that constantly demands we do specific things at highly specific, externally dictated moments.
This quote really hits the nail on the head as to why that pushback happens. For the chronically late, rigid rules represent restriction and limitation rather than safety. I want to repeat that because it points out such a profound difference in how we operate. For a lot of punctual folks, a strict schedule is a total safety net. It creates order, predictability, and calm in a crazy world. But for the person who's always running 5 minutes behind, that exact same schedule feels completely suffocating. It represents a loss of their autonomy. So they subconsciously reject it because in their mind, it's an artificial boundary tying them down, not a cozy wall keeping them safe.
And all of this ties into what I think is the most fascinating trait of the whole shebang. Chronically late people exhibit a noticeably higher tolerance for uncertainty. This is the brilliant psychological dynamic that connects all the dots we've been talking about. Think about it. If you don't look at rigid rules and schedules as your source of safety, you simply don't need absolute certainty to feel comfortable. A punctual person might feel actual heart-pounding anxiety at the mere thought of being unstructured or cutting it close. But the perpetually late person, they've got a built-in psychological buffer. They can totally tolerate the uncertainty of rushing, of not knowing exactly what traffic is going to do, or leaving things to the last possible second. Their underlying psychological makeup just navigates the unknown without setting off the panic alarms that the rest of us might feel.
So, as we wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you with this question. How does viewing lateness through the lens of uncertainty tolerance change the way you see the chronically late people in your own life?
Just think about what we've covered today. We took something society instantly labels as simply rude and uncovered a whole hidden framework of time perception, a deep-seated aversion to impose structure, and this surprisingly high tolerance for uncertainty. I really challenge you to apply this new empathetic lens to your own relationships. Next time someone walks in exactly 5 minutes late, remember this paradigm shift. It just might turn a moment of sheer frustration into a moment of really fascinating psychological insight. Thanks so much for joining me today to explore this, and as always, keep questioning the why behind the things we see every single day.